475,000 people that live in the Springs. You still have rural Pasco County right around us. So it's a large area, large city. Its homicide rate is low for its size. The clearance rate for those homicides is very high for its size. Colorado Springs has done a great job in policing, a great job working with the community, and good at clearing cases. Work well with the district attorney's office, work well with DEA, ATF, all these agencies all work in a very positive manner. There are 5 major military bases around Colorado Springs. United States Air Force Academy. The United States Air Force Academy.
Yeah, there we go.
Fort Carson, Cheyenne Mountain Center Complex, Schriever Air Force Base, and Peterson Air Force Base. So we did a lot with military. Most of the problems really came from Fort Carson as opposed to the Air Force. The Academy people, if they got in trouble, they were out, so they really behaved themselves pretty good. But that has a big impact in Colorado Springs. When there's a great deployment, a lot of officers, a lot of soldiers are gone, our economy's down, and we don't have a great amount of money to put into more officers. We were well below the 2 per 1,000 individual that is the ultimate goal in law enforcement. We were like 1.4 at one point. 1.4 officers per 1,000 people. And that's not a whole lot. And it's not all officers that are on patrol. You have detectives, you have just a wide variety of specialized groups, tactical enforcement, motorcycle enforcement, that are out there with their own designated or specific chores to be doing. Their missions were sometimes different than what patrol was. Patrol has probably the best job because they go do their job, they go home at night and they come back starting the same tomorrow morning. They go in kind of raw sometimes, so it's probably the more dangerous job because by the time we were called out, they had control of the scene. Our biggest risk was trying to track down the suspect. Can't forget. We also had fugitive unit, which helped on that. We'd have tactical operations would come out, SWAT would go in and break down the doors for us, grab the guy. So really, although we carried raid vests with us, generally we didn't wear our vest unless we were really out after somebody who could be a potential threat for us.
Do you have another question? I just gave you my
Brian, you mentioned Colorado was the first state to make recreational. I'm from Arizona. I will tell you that in Arizona, that came up on that voted down. I am very interested in any track record that is now available after the number of years that it has been legalized in the state. What, if any, evidence do you see, or does law enforcement see, of the effect of that law change on crime, on overdosing, or children getting involved with it, that it's in the home, vehicular, anything in regards to that? What kind of statistics are you beginning to formulate from that original law change?
It's hard for me to answer that. I will tell you that most of our homicides usually involve drugs or family relations. Just watching the newspaper, reading the articles, medical marijuana had a positive financial impact to those areas that allowed it. Same with the recreational marijuana had a positive financial impact to the communities. There was a lot of talk about worrying about DUI and DUID, driving under the influence of drug problems. And that hasn't really materialized. I mean, there are a lot of people who say, no, we're going to have all this. The reason it may not have materialized is because there's no real field test for somebody who's high. When you sit there, a drug test or an alcohol test where you do the physical maneuvers will tell you a lot. They don't always apply to somebody who's under the influence of marijuana. They had problems trying to determine at what point, like 0.05 is impaired on alcohol. They don't try to figure out what point of nanograms of marijuana or THC in somebody's bloodstream actually impaired them. They weren't ready for doing what they did because law enforcement didn't have the tools necessary emergency alert charge. The other thing is the Colorado Springs and El Paso County, not Colorado Springs, sorry, El Paso County in the rural areas of Colorado, more susceptible to organized crime, because we get a lot of people growing marijuana when you're allowed to have 4 or 5 plants after each, like 99 or something. And people were just growing it there willy-nilly and then shipping it out of the state. And we get a lot of problems with that. You know, Paso County will go out there in their areas and do drug busts where they have containers full of drugs when they're done. We have people growing marijuana for the purpose of selling outside the state. So it made it easier for them to grow it, a little hard for them to get it out, but it did have some impact on the city itself. I hope that answers some of the things. I personally did not do anything that I can recall working on somebody who was a serial killer. We had some in Colorado. I'm trying to think, I can't remember the last one. But it would be more challenging. We speak for the victim. Our job is to work for the victim. Okay? And the more victims you have from one person, it's a little harder. Trying to figure out their motive, try to track down their patterns of what they do, try to build a case against the individual. And you may be able to build a case against this one victim, but not against the others. So sometimes you get lucky, you get a guy who's killed more than 2 or 3 people, you get him on one case, you still got him off the street. That's still our advantage.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have almost like a 3-way conversation with whoever wants to have a question, and especially the dynamic, like I talked about this morning, of how they work as a team. What I would like to do, once again, is at the bar, if we can kind of keep that, and also, if you would like a blender drink, the blenders are really loud, and we can't hear. So if you're going to order a blender drink, I call them a food drink, like a pina colada or a strawberry daiquiri, any kind of blender drink, do us a big favor. There are lots of bars on this same deck, just that. You could get the blended drinks from there. Just bring it back in. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Brian Ritz and Joe Kenda.
I decided everything in the world. Brian worked for me for a long time because he's an excellent detective. He paid attention to detail. I always knew every time Brian told me anything, I didn't have to worry about it because it was great. That's important. Other detectives who worked for me would tell me something, and I'd think, did he really say that? Is that what he, because sometimes I find out it wasn't. That was never a concern with Brian, ever. You knew that's what it was. Whatever he said is what it was. And that made a huge difference when you're doing a planning of an investigation. And I was sorry to see him leave homicide, but he wanted to advance in rank. Good for him. And he did. Not surprising, but he did. So we had a great time together. We spent a lot of times in the middle of the night. We saw a lot of sunrises together. We weren't supposed to be doing that, but we did. And that's the nature of it. So anyway, Brian's a good guy. There aren't too many good guys in the world. You're welcome. So now, who has a question?
I'm going to jump out and say one thing. There were times when we were very busy. 3 homicides in a weekend. One Friday night, one Saturday night, one Sunday night. When you finally get back to the office and try to start doing your dictation, writing your reports, sorting your evidence, you're going, which case goes with what? That note's over here, this note's over here. So there was always that kind of game plan. We've had 2 in one day, 2 in one afternoon. Keeps you very busy because one call team's on, that's it. If it's really bad, we might try to pull the other people in, but generally 1 call team not on. And when I was working, there was 3 detectives on a call team. Now it's like 8 or 9 detectives, and part of that's due to social media. You because somebody's sitting down running everybody on social media to see what they have to say. So if you're going to do a crime, don't put it on social media. There's two rules. You keep your mouth shut, and second, you don't put it on social media, and you're a whole lot better off.
It's common for people who shoot people for the cartels that they'll pose with their victims. You know, the idiot standing there with his foot in the chest of the victim holding the gun, you know, it's on his phone, you know. You go through the phone, you say, oh, Ernesto, your lawyer is going to hate this photograph. He's really not going to like this. That's pathetic. Yes?
I'm Robin from Portland, Oregon area. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on the paid anarchists that they're talking about.
I don't know what you're referring to.
I do know what you're talking about. The people that are paid to go out and disrupt legal, correct protests. You know, everybody can protest, but there's a way to protest, and then these anarchists come in and try to turn it into a violent property damage, beating people up, all this type of protest. When I was, the last position I had was in patrol support, where I managed and further developed the crowd control team. So we were quite aware of this. We sent 20 officers and myself down to Anniston, Alabama, Center for Domestic Preparedness, where they taught us crowd control techniques and crowd control devices, and how to defeat these devices that these geniuses all use to try to further disrupt the community. It was a lot of work, and it was that. There's quite an art to trying to do this, because you're trying to protect their civil rights, your civil rights, and the rest of the people's civil rights. And emotions run high usually during these type of protests. And as an officer, if some guy is all tied up in some kind of protester device that's blocking it, you got to get him out of that without hurting him, or you become civilly liable for a lot of things. You know, the best thing to do if somebody has a protest is ignore it. Don't be part of it. Don't go anywhere near it. You know, it's like we used to tell our kids in school. If two guys are going to fight, everybody else doesn't show up, they won't fight. Because they don't have an audience, they're not being pushed into it.
Who else has a question? Yeah, here we go.
One thing to add, remember something if you don't remember anything else. There's no such thing as a spontaneous demonstration.
Yeah.
No such thing. They're all organized for one reason or another.
Hi, I'm Nancy from Los Angeles. I know you don't particularly like the police TV shows, but there are a lot of TV shows about private investigators, and I'm wondering if you ever ran across any in your career and what that was like.
Is this for me or for Brian? Okay. I had contact with several private investigators who worked usually for defense attorneys. Generally, they're employed by defense attorneys. That's the only way to make a living as a private investigator generally is to work for lawyers, because individuals can't afford them or don't want to afford them, so they wind up working for attorneys. I knew some very good people. I knew some ones that weren't so good. It's like any other occupational group. You know, you have your good ones and your average ones and your not so hot ones. And that's just the way it is. And I think, what do you think about private investigators? Be nice, Brian. Just remember.
I'm trying to get this right. I had a case where it was a multi-million-dollar theft. And I was pulled a warrant on a business. Their attorney got involved, locked it down. So here I am seizing the business for a while. And the bad guy who I was investigating grabbed all the evidence, took it up to a friend of his in the family up in Denver, and asked him to hide it for him. Well, the husband wasn't there, but the wife was there. She said, really? Well, my husband's working that case. He was a private investigator. All of a sudden, I had every bit of evidence I need, that's mine, and it worked. That's one case with a private investigator that worked out for me. That's because the genius didn't know he was taking the evidence to the guy that was working the case against him. And he did pretty good, because these were 5 or 8 guys that left a large corporation. They started their own company. And he got some cute little blonde to go in there and ask for a job, and of course they hired her, and it was his mole that he put inside the business, and it pretty well cleared it. They can be sneakier than we can. Their rules are a little bit different than ours by a lot. We're trying to support the Constitution. They're just trying to get the guy caught. We have a lot harder job, but they can be helpful. They can also really jam you up because everything they find, you have to follow up on, whether it's good or bad, and thus just prolong your investigation.
Over here on your right side, please.
Hi, I have a question. I guess it's more of a personal side. During your investigation days, how did you balance work-life balance? Like, what was that like? That's something that, as much as you guys worked and were on the scene and on, at the office and everything, your wives, and children, how did that, how hard was that, I guess?
Well, if I ever figured that out, I'd answer your question. There's no way to do that. There's just no way to do it. It's my wife and my kids suffered for it. I try to keep it from them. I don't know if anybody said this already because I was busy signing, but the next to the last episode of this season. Now, I don't have any input into naming episodes. The programming department of Discovery Incorporated names them 72 hours before they go in the air. So we never know what the names are. I know them by numbers. All right. So the next to the last episode, 8/19, this season, season 8, episode 19, is the Kathy Kenda Show. 1 hour, the whole show will be Kathy, and shockingly, my kids who agreed to be interviewed by Discovery. And I thought, wow, my son's a commander in the Navy and an intelligence officer, and it's like the last thing I ever thought he'd ever do is talk to anybody about anything. My daughter is a GS-14 in top secret position at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And I figured, you gotta say, well, yeah, I'll do it. You will? So anyway, Kathy and I, the other day, got the raw footage of the interviews. We laughed until we thought we were going to throw up. It's the kids' perspective of what they remember their childhood was like, and their parents who lived that same experience has a totally different perspective. It's really great. And they hustled my kid, my son, and oh yeah, and he fell for it. I was disappointed in him, but they said, he said, "Is that camera on?" "Oh, it's not on." It's always on. And the guy says, "How was your mother as a cook?" And he says, "Oh, my mother was a horrible cook." So, but it's really interesting to see. And in those interviews, they both said that they never felt that I had imposed my work on them. And it was my greatest fear. And I thought, I know I've done this. Oh God, a horrible thing. They don't think so. I mean, it's kind of interesting, it's really fun, but that episode should be something very different. That's some true insight into the four of us, my wife and my 2 kids and all. So that'd be fun, I think, for one. But anyway, that's the answer. You try the best, you do the best you can, which is never good enough, right?
That really holds true. My wife raised our kids. I was there as much as I could be. I was on call probably half of my career. So we decided, we want to go to a movie. We're taking 2 cars. In case I get called out. When we go to dinner, take 2 cars. She had to put up a lot. She knew what I was doing. She was a police dispatcher when I met her. She was good at telling me where to go then, and she's still good at telling me where to go. If it wasn't for the family support, our jobs would have been a whole lot harder. And they did make it. The family is, obviously, you're doing this job for family. There are cops that are cops because that's what they want to be. Others use it as a career to help their families, to support their families. That's where I was at. She supported me in my choices in my career. She still tells me where to go, but that's okay. I'm used to that.
Over here.
Hi, Joe. Phil from Atlanta. Once again, I want to thank you for your service, and most of all, earlier today, when you mentioned essentially recruiting, hiring, mentoring, essentially choosing people for detective work. My question is, as a boss, was there ever a time when somebody didn't exactly take to it, they stumbled out of the blocks, and then you're initially thinking, you know, it might be time for them to find another job, but then they totally surprised you, and it's like, wow, I'm so glad I hired this person.
Of course, I mean, it always happens. When somebody's new at something, they don't start off winning the first race. They finish in the middle of the pack, or maybe even last. And you give them time, and you see how it progresses, and you watch them, and you pay attention to their work, and what you're looking for is signs of improvement. If there is improvement, it will continue. If improvement never initiates, then maybe this was a mistake, okay? But I've never seen that happen. They were always able to catch on, as it were, and move forward with things and become really good at it. Like anything else. You don't paint a picture the first time you try. It's the same thing in murder. It's the very same thing.
When we had people like, as a sergeant, as a lieutenant, I had to pick and select people for the jobs. You run into a few that just, it wasn't for them. They saw it as one thing, they realize it's not for them. And a lot of these guys that would try a new position, new career, and it wasn't working for them, they were intelligent enough to recognize that. The problem is, if you don't make it a specialized unit, where you go? You go back to patrol. But patrol is really the backbone of the police department. They're first on scene. They're the ones who make the initial calls, make the initial determination of what's going on, and who else may need to be brought into the case. When we go out, the scene was locked down. It was secured. Tactical operations the same way. Officers get on scene, you get a barricaded suspect, who they call? SWAT. Who's the safest people out there right now? SWAT. They work together as a team, they train together as a team, and they have all the good tools. So patrol is the area where we like people, where we want them to succeed. Yes, it's nice that they can come back or expand and go to work with us in investigations or whatever like that. And it's a bad thing. They get a bad rap when they can't make it as investigator. Almost ship them back to patrol. It's not ship them back to patrol. It's give them the opportunity to go back and continue to do what they were good at. Because we don't generally pick people who weren't good at what position they were at in the first place.
The other thing I think is important for all of you to know, that both Brian and I, and every other police supervisor or manager in the police department, when you have an employee who misbehaves, particularly when he does so intentionally, we take action. We have to recruit our members to the ranks of human rights, and as a result, we make mistakes. If we could get just those robots to work, it would solve all these problems. But we can't, so far the technology is not there, so we have to invite humans to join the police department, and they bring with them their prejudices and their mistakes and so on. As an example, and because it's kind of amusing, at least I think it is, I had an officer who I will not name, who I thought was brutal. I couldn't prove it, not at the time, but I just thought he was. And I didn't like him at all. And I called him into my office. I was a watch commander in the Sand Creek Division when I got promoted to lieutenant. And I said, come in here, man, I want to talk to you. And he's arrogant, kind of standoffish. And he, well, what? Sit down. And I said, my wife says I need a hobby. And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? She says all I think about is the police department, and all I do is work, and I never come home, I never take the kids anywhere. And I drone on for a while, and he's looking at me like a dog looking at a TV set. I mean, he doesn't know what's going on here, And I finally said, and I decided something that I think my wife is right. I need a hobby. And I've selected you. And I'm going to spend the next 90 days running you out of this police department on a rail and get out of my office. And 64 days later, I fired him. And we went to court, and we played the game, and Civil Service Commission, and you can't do this to me. Oh, yes, I can, and I can prove it. And it's stuck. So we get rid of these people when we could. We have a question over here to your left.
Hi, gentlemen. Rhonda Taylor over here from Kansas City, Missouri. This is looking for advice, and it's actually for my husband. As far as, since you two gentlemen have been through the promotional process, if you have any pearls of wisdom, suggestions or things, he spent 5 years in patrol, 1 year in crimes against children, and now he's currently in homicide just a little over a year. And I am encouraging him to go forward with the sergeant's process. And I was just wondering if you had a suggestion that maybe he needs to be in investigations a few more years. Obviously, we want him to be a well-rounded supervisor. Just any sort of advice you might have. Thank you.
Obviously, the more experience they have in a wider variety of career options in the police department is to their advantage. I would always tell the guys that were interested in supervisors, mine was more towards their interview techniques and stuff like that. And generally, you're trying to get them to say not who they are or what they are, it's what they can do for the department, what they have to offer the department. And that is hard. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, I don't generally like talking about myself. My job made me do it. I'm very much an introvert. Type A personality, bro. But I'm an introvert, but my job made me go outside.
You see why we teased him all the time? You see what I mean? He was too easy. I mean, we just
So what Sal told you was wrong. What I told you was right. But really, that's just it. The more experience he has, and the more he has to offer the department, not what the department has to offer him or what he's done. And that's really the best way to encourage people is teaching them to be able to speak about themselves in a non-bolsterous way and what they can do for the department in a new position.
We have another question right back here.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Casey from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Woo! Oh, sorry. Sorry.
one Indy fan.
So sorry.
I was wondering how long it took for each of you to solve, the longest time it took for you to solve a crime, and also any interactions with sovereign citizens that you might have.
What was the second part again?
Interaction with sovereign citizens?
Oh, yeah. The street corner lawyer, you mean those guys? I'll answer that. And the longest case I ever worked was a homicide, 9 years to turn a case. And it resulted in arrest for 2 people, and both went to prison for life for first-degree murder. It took 9 years to get there, okay? You have people in the world who believe, because they listen to some idiot on a radio station or something that says that they have certain rights, inalienable rights, and they can do this and they can do that, and it's all nonsense. And those people wind up in jail if they commit a crime, and so on. I had an example where the IRS, well, you wouldn't know it was the IRS, I didn't know at the time, but I was a supervisor in patrol. 2 guys go on a disturbance call. 12 guys in sport coats are dragging the contents of a very nice house out and stacking it in the street. Sport coats and ties. And the guy that owns the house is purple with rage, and the 2 cops are kind of standing there looking at me, and I get out of the car, and they've directed him to me, because I'm the supervisor, and he says, I want all these people arrested. Okay, is this your house? Yes. Okay. And so what does that mean? Well, I don't pay taxes because I'm a sovereign citizen. Is that right? So you believe that the government doesn't have the authority to make you pay taxes? Yes. And have you ever paid taxes? No. So this is the $600,000 house. And the contents seem to be rather nice. Well, I'm a sovereign, okay, you said that. You said that. Who's in charge here, gentlemen? And the guy says, that would be me. I'm Special Agent so-and-so, Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. I have an order from a tax court to tell that fat-mouthed idiot that's not his house, it's mine. And I don't want his property, and that's why I'm stacking it in the street. And I think it's going to rain, so he ought to go rent a truck to get his stuff out of the street. And I walked up to this guy who's standing there purple with rage, and I said, Mr. Citizen, I think he's right. I think it's going to rain. I think you need to go rent a truck, you nitwit. And so we promptly got in our police cars and left. And the RS kept carrying all his stuff out of his house and staggering in the street. And as I was leaving, I reminded him that littering is against the law. So, he has a certain amount of time to remove this property from the street.
Most of the contacts I ever had were when one of my units, whether it be a motorcycle officer or whatever, would run into somebody and they were trying to write them a ticket or something like that. And of course, I'm a sovereign citizen, you can't stop me, you can't do this, you have no rights. And trying to talk logic to them is not going to work. There are times you have to get physical with somebody and you get your job done without the minimum amount of force. If that means dragging them out through the window, it means dragging them out through the window, and it has happened. Probably should happen more often, but I'm not supporting that. So generally, it's become very aggressive, assertive, and all I can tell my officers is just do your job the way you would normally do your job. It'll all come out in the end. We do get officers every once in a while to take things personal. That's when internal affairs complaints come down. You got to investigate them, discipline them, or most likely have to discipline them for something stupid. And it usually dealt with something just like that. They got all hot and bothered because somebody said, I'm a sovereign citizen, you have no control over me. Well, I don't.